White. Havertz! How they've not been for that! Top of the league!
All right, everyone, welcome back. We are the TnT Footy Podcast. You have your host here. My name is Dave. You can find me on Twitter at AFC_1811. With me here, we have Jack. You can find him on Twitter at GattaKFC. And also with us here, we have Arda, who again does all the hard work of getting us together for these episodes where we can spew our absolutely incorrect Arsenal opinions, as well as editing everything that goes into it. So thank you, Arda. You can find him on Twitter at AKSparks. Last time we saw you guys, we had done sort of an early season Arsenal review. We went over a lot of our big games, such as City away, Spurs away, our Champions League openers against PSG and Atalanta. Again, we sort of touched on how we were feeling to start the season and how we dealt with the injuries that we did, some of the unlucky officiating that we dealt with as well. And I think that it's safe to say that we all came out feeling pretty decent. Since then, we've faced Southampton last week, and now we're in the international break looking ahead to Bournemouth, followed by Shakhtar midweek in the Champions League, and then Liverpool after that. So those are our sort of next three games on the horizon. We'd like to touch on that Southampton game and see what went right, what went wrong, before diving into how we think we'll set up against those next three teams and how we're feeling about it as well. So, gentlemen, let's start with Southampton. Jack, I want to throw it over to you. Any generalities about the Southampton match that you want to touch on?
First and foremost, I feel like sort of the talking point was the first 11 that was put out on the team sheet against them. Obviously, Sterling came in to start, Jesus came in to start, Partey at right back. A lot of stuff that we weren't really used to. Obviously, there's been a lot of moving pieces this season, but I would say that this was the most drastic change for an 11 up to this point so far. I definitely think that if there is a game that is appropriate to get other players minutes, I think I said Bournemouth, I meant Southampton, but you get the point. If there is any game appropriate to players rest, get other players minutes to get them up to speed, you're quite literally never going to find one better suited than Southampton home. I do think that what we got out of Jesus and Sterling, for me, I think there was a lot of talk sort of in the media about being upset, and I think there is some truth to that in that their performances maybe weren't completely up to standard. But I don't think that Sterling, Jesus, or Partey sort of hindered us, right? I do think that they came in and gave us exactly what we needed out of players that are going to come in and give your starting 11 rest. I think Sterling looked very sharp, especially in the first 30 to 45 minutes. Jesus maybe not as up to speed for what we'd expect from a player like that. But Partey is definitely someone I want to touch on. Obviously, we've been dealing with fullback injuries for the majority of the start of the season. So even with the fullback depth, starting Partey at right back is definitely not our first choice option. Allowing him to come in, obviously, regardless of what you think about his fitness or wanting him on the pitch for a full 90 or starting or whatever, he is obviously an important player to Arteta. He is a player that Arteta wants on the ball. He wants to dictate tempo. I'm sure we'll touch on what sort of space he occupies. But I think that he came in and he did his role, as did the other two. Obviously, the game was a little more stressful than we had anticipated, but to sort of bring all my thoughts together, I don't think there was an inherent issue with those three players starting where they were. I think that if you're going to make a run that you want to make in the season, then you need to be able to count on these kinds of players coming in and playing those minutes and getting through these games with little to no stress behind it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that the biggest thing is exactly what you said, in that the teams who are challenging on all fronts, for the UCL, for the Premier League, for the FA Cup, for any other domestic titles as well, you have to be comfortable with rotating and using the entire depth of your squad. It's what we've seen Liverpool in past years do. It's what we've seen City, of course, in past years do. City typically being a team where you don't even know their best 11 until about March or so. So, there's this thing that we as fans like to do, where we want to say that or we like to say rather that we want to see rotation, we want to see other players come in, we want to see players rested, but then there's this simultaneous sort of discomfort when you do see those other players come in to allow for the rest of your best players. And I completely agree in that it's something that has to be done. And if it's going to be done, that Southampton home is the perfect opportunity to do so. So, looking back, even despite, like you said, maybe not being the best of performances, and we can dive into what they did specifically, that starting Jesus and Sterling for this match in particular was definitely the right call by Arteta. Looking sort of past beyond the international break, looking at the cluster of fixtures that we have coming up, just like I said at the beginning of the episode with Shakhtar, Bournemouth, Liverpool, and then beyond that, Newcastle, Chelsea, Inter, all in the near future. It's something that we have to get comfortable with. It's something that I'm not sure we were comfortable with last season, and we saw that in a few of the performances. I'm not sure if you guys remember Ben White's dip in form at the beginning of last season, but that's nothing more than him carrying an injury, having to play through it, and of course dropping the level because you simply cannot compete if you're not at 100%. So I think that we have a luxury that maybe some Arsenal fans aren't acknowledging right now, in that we can rotate and we can keep the level, or just about the level, required to grind out victories and get those 3 points when we need to in the absence of key players. Jesus, Sterling came in, Partey came in, like you said, and we'll continue to do that as Marino gets more integrated. And we'll move. Arda, do you have any sort of comments on that? The team that was selected?
Not necessarily on the team select, kind of, really, but so I agree with what you're saying about resting our best players, and that this game was kind of a signal that we could do that and keep our form going. However, and there's this big but looming over all that for me, is Saka was a very key player in that whole game. And he was if he got rested that game, maybe it could have been a different story. Maybe I'm stretching it there because it's Southampton, and it's also important to keep in mind that Saka's also pulling a greater weight on the pitch with Odegaard not being there as well. So there's also all that come into play. But I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on that. So I feel like the polar opposite side of the argument that we were just making, right? If you want to compete and you really want to go and win everything that you so desperately, every top club's goal at the beginning of the season, if you're in the shoes of Arsenal, you can win the league, you can push in the Champions League. First and foremost, you need a deep squad. You need to know you have between 16 to 18 guys that throughout the season, you can call on. They can come, they can be a piece of the puzzle, and your form isn't going to drop. By the same token, I feel like if you look at a lot of top clubs' best seasons, think Liverpool of the past few years, think the really successful City years, the other side of that is not only do you have such a deep squad where you have a lot of players that can come and do their job and just sort of help and do their part, you also have your top class, top 5, top 10 in the world players who are seemingly staying fit, and they're putting up those numbers for 45 to 50 weeks of the entire season. It makes me nervous because what does happen if Saka gets injured? Of course, there's rumors. We don't know if he's even going to be fit for Bournemouth at the weekend. But that said, if we are going to go and compete with City and Liverpool, whose underlying metrics and points up to this point in the season do look very, very good, and if we're going to push in the Champions League, we're going to need the arguable top 2, top 3, possibly in some cases the best right winger in the world to stay fit for us and put up those numbers.
Real quick,
yeah.
That being said about the Bournemouth game, I just think that'd be a good time to test out, if we're going to give Saka a rest, because it's a very similar vibe to the Southampton game. The only thing being that we're the away team and not the home team, so there's that advantage difference. But I don't want to jump too much into the Bournemouth game now, because I know, Dave, you haven't had a chance to speak about the Southampton game quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that we could talk about the Southampton game. First of all, I do absolutely agree that there's this mix that you want to reach with who you're resting, and who you are playing, which is obviously as simple as it gets. I'm not reinventing the wheel by saying that. We did start Havertz and we did start Saka, and they were the two guys who eventually came through. Havertz got the goal back, the equalizer. Saka set up the winner, and then also got our insurance goal late. And it is one of those things where, Jack, like you said, you do need your most fit players to be available 45 to 50 times a season. But we're playing in an age now where you have 65 to 70 matches a season for a team like Arsenal, who's expected to go deep in the UCL, expected to go deep in the domestic cups. So I think that with that, again, Arteta's trying to find a balance in who he can rest. Again, choosing to rest Martinelli, choosing to rest Timber if he wasn't at 100% or if he was completely ruled out. I believe it was him not being completely match fit, but surely in another season we absolutely could have and probably would have seen him shoehorned in. I'm looking back at the seasons like 22-23 and 21-22 where we did have a huge sort of tendency to play players prior to when they're 100%. So I'm glad that we're shifting in a direction where players who aren't maybe there are being rested. But like you said, when we do rest those key players, Timber and Martinelli, two of our most important players, you still do have to certainly counterbalance that by ensuring that your other key players who will still dictate the tempo are out there. Keep in mind, this wasn't a match where we had the luxury of resting Odegaard. We were without him because of injury. So, all things considered, it was a tough match to navigate for other reasons. We've seen tough matches to navigate against City because of red card decisions, against Spurs because of other injury decisions, and now because it's one where Arteta really had to put his stamp on and show that he was a manager who had the faith in his available players as well as the courage to rotate and signal that he is thinking about future competitions. Does that make sense? I see you guys nodding there. So now I think, it is probably a good time to get in with what those players who did come in did and did not do. And so I think that, Jesus is the one who really caused a lot, or probably most of the dialogue of that Southampton game, probably not for the reasons that he would have liked to. Jesus, he's a player, and every time you bring up Jesus, I feel like it's hard not to bring up the levels that he was playing at when he first came along in 2022. It was a player who seemed fit, he was thin, he was agile, he was beating players for fun, scoring, assisting, doing everything that you needed as a center forward. He linked play. Seriously, one of the best players in the league when we signed him. And, like I was saying, a player who, when hurt, still trudged through. He still went to the World Cup with that little bit of a niggle knee injury, right? And then completely got the MCL? I know it wasn't his ACL, but I believe it was either his meniscus or his MCL that he ended up straining at that World Cup. So then, of course, came the longer time on the sideline. And when he came back, it never really seemed like he got back to speed. And that's carried all the way to now, when he is now the rotation player. Havertz has now moved completely into the 9 role. Jesus is getting less and less time, and if he is coming on, he's coming on as an impact sub or in these rotation games. And it seems like when he does come on, it's a player who's trying to grapple with that loss of importance in the side and that loss of sort of that key figure role that he used to have. It's a player who seems like he wants it back and he's trying too hard to get it back. Jack, because I don't want to ramble for too long, I want to pass it off to you, but this even kind of goes back to the Spurs game, to the PSG game. What do you take, generally speaking, of Jesus's previous performances?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of have a lot of thoughts on current day Jesus. One thing that came to my mind was when I think of when he was at his best for Arsenal, it was the first 3 months pre-World Cup 22-23, when we were just coming off of a season where we had finished 5th. Obviously, we looked very good to end the season, didn't finish in a Champions League spot, but nobody could have guessed that we were going to be on a 100-point pace for the first half of that season. I wonder how much of teams knowing who Arsenal actually are now kind of influences how Jesus is able to play his game. I think of, for instance, the Southampton game. They came to the Emirates and they did exactly what they wanted to do. They sat deep for the first 30 to 45 minutes. They were able to not concede. Halftime comes along, they grab a smash and grab goal to go up 1-0, and I believe the 55th minute. That is exactly what any low to mid-table team wants to come and do against a top six side. Um, Roots at the 9 as opposed to Jesus. I feel like we just have far more identity. We know exactly what the game plan is. We know how he is able to help out the wingers, help out the midfielders with his physical presence that we so desperately need now that teams are coming to the Emirates and putting up such a physical, defensive-minded performance against us 9 times out of 10. Jesus, I like as a player. I think that his football mind coincides with Arteta. As someone who is super flashy, he is someone that will put the team first. His press is still second to none, and I'll always support him for that. And I think it still looked good in this last game against Southampton. But his on the ball, of course, he's coming off of an injury, and a pretty serious one at that, from just a year and a half or 2 years ago, that he never quite seemed to recover from to its fullest extent. Um, I guess all of this is to say, physically speaking, for what this current team needs, especially in these very chippy fights, week in, week out in the Prem, I don't know if I ever see Jesus being our guy, especially at the 9. I love him coming in as a sub, and in theory, again, to our point that we made earlier, I love him getting a lot of minutes so that other guys can get a rest. But my worry is the actual performances that he's putting in are not up to level to get us 3 points week in, week out when we do need him to come and perform. And that's kind of my stance on Jesus at the moment.
Yeah, I think what you said, especially with him being so good in the press still, I think that is a little bit of a microcosm of what he still brings us. Because even in the Southampton game, the first 15 or 20 minutes of that match, where we were really suffocating them in the press and our field tilt was really well, and we were, again, having a lot of possession up in their side of the pitch, and when we were turning it over, pressing high to win it back on their side of the pitch. Again, what Jesus still brings us is an energy, grit, determination to show that he is willing to do what Arteta wants him to do. We saw that in the Spurs game as well. When him and Nwaneri came on late, he told Nwaneri to stay high. He was going to do that defensive dirty work. So the thing with Jesus is not an issue of him, again, his determination, his selflessness for the club, because he still brings that energy. He presses completely well, and he will do the dirty work, like I've been saying. What I feel it is possibly just sometimes you lose that step as you age. And I think back to some players who have had similar injuries or similar sort of injury pathways. I think back to Jack Wilshere. I think back to an older Theo Walcott, where over time, where they've dealt with injuries, come back, dealt with more injuries, and have come back, you just see them lose that half step. And sometimes there is nothing more than that. You lose a bit of pace, you lose a bit of agility, you lose a bit of athleticism, and you can't do the things that you used to be able to do. For Jesus, that may be the case, because he certainly hasn't lost the mentality that we brought him in for. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's still in the leaders group. If it's him and Gabriel and Saka and Odegaard, is it those four, if I'm not mistaken? And he hasn't left that group. And you see that not only, when the club comes out and says that those are the four, you see that on the pitch. You could pick him out when he's out there, and you could say that's a guy who's dictating what his teammates do. He's personifying what the manager wants the side to do. He's bringing that mentality and bringing it out on the pitch, and that's part of why it's a little bit so sour to me that we've lost such a great player, because he is so passionate that he played through injuries and as a result got punished and got an even bigger injury that has set him back even more again at that World Cup. It is sour because every once in a while you come across that compilation on Twitter that I'm sure we've all seen of early 22-23 Jesus, and it brings back those memories of what we thought we had, and what we have been deprived from since. Seen it in bits and pieces like Anfield away, in the back half of 22-23. Preseason this year is what I thought we were going to get out of him, but then another injury comes along, and again, sometimes when the athleticism goes, you just lose a bit of the player. And again, I don't want to ramble, Arda. I'll let you touch on it. What do you take of modern day Jesus and what he can give us?
I mean, I think you guys pretty much nailed it. not to get Hallmark with it, but he burned too bright for such a short amount of time. Like, he burned out too quick, you know? He's not that good of a talent, but I'm still going to compare him to Derrick Rose, compare it to another sport, you know, people getting injured and having that passion, the same mentality. Derrick Rose still loved basketball, but like especially like when you have those knee injuries or CL injuries, whatever CL is, ACL, MCL, I don't know all the terms, but you don't really see people come back from those stronger often. And that's when like to give him his flowers, that's why people like Ronaldo are also kind of like genetic freaks. Like he came back from injury, not even like perfect, but adjusted his game. He's just that much of like a talented player that he was able to adjust and still stay at the top of the world in terms of skill level and, you know, everything else, output, whatever you want to name it. It is so sad though with Jesus. When he first joined, I was so excited. I don't even give a damn about the price tag because everything he brought for us, those moments, the excitement.
Well worth it.
Exactly.
Well worth it.
I'm honestly just happy that he's happy to be at Arsenal, and I appreciate his like mature mentality. I didn't even know he was telling Maneri to like, you know, you stay up, I'll take care of it. You know, that's so like that's a nice like I'm glad that our club builds that environment for the players and the younger people. I'm assuming the staff too, but,
For sure.
you know what I mean. But yeah, that's all I really got on Jesus. Hoping he gets better, but I'm happy with him as he is. I don't really want to expect much more from him. We love you, Jesus.
No, I mean, I will say, like, again, despite maybe his lower level, I think that it goes back to sort of how we opened this Southampton game and what it represented in that it is a filler game that we need to make sure we are getting all 3 points from. And you better believe that Jesus is still a good enough player, albeit still maybe getting the legs under him from the beginning of the season and the injury that came on the back of that. Still certainly good enough to be a player who can get us those 3 points as a rotation player in those matches. Because again, we see how valuable he is in the press. We see how valuable he is in those tight spaces still. Again, maybe having lost half a step, still mentality is there. The ability is certainly there in an underlying state. And we can hope that he just continues to build on it because a lot more of these Southampton games are coming and all of them need 3 points to be gained from them. With that, those are maybe the pros and cons of Jesus that game. Another controversial player from that game and a lot of back and forth being spoken about Raheem Sterling. Maybe not just with this game, but maybe with the start here of his Arsenal career. Jack, what did you take of his performance on Saturday? Because I feel like we could go a lot of different directions here.
Yes. So first, I want to give him his flowers. I do think that he came out and looked like the kind of Sterling that we had maybe hoped and expected to sign. I think piggybacking off the conversation we had about Jesus, it's a little ironic. I almost think that Sterling is kind of the opposite of what we had just said about Jesus. I think that Sterling right now is a player who in spurts looks like he still has his athletic edge. He looks sharp. He looks like a player who is capable and ready to take on his man and do what a left winger should do, especially in the absence of Martinelli when you need energy coming onto the pitch if you're taking energy off the pitch. The reason I say I think one of my complaints with Sterling right now is we're now a couple of months into the season, and of course he hasn't seen many game time minutes, of course, but he doesn't seem maybe too aligned with Arteta's vision. I feel like one of the big praises that this current Arsenal team gets is their I don't know, I feel like it's the whole 11's focus on being on the same page. Specifically, like you can shout out the Man City second half where down to 10 men, everyone was just kind of dialed in on the same exact laser focused defensive low block. And of course, it should have worked, almost worked. I digress. The thing about Sterling is you look at, where the goal we concede, right? I don't imagine that happens to anyone. I think if a foul is called, then no one inherently has a huge issue with it. But it's also the kind of place on the pitch that an Arteta winger never really loses the ball. It's a position that you never see this Arteta team really getting caught out in transition with so much control that we typically try to place on the games that we play. All in all, I think that Sterling is. I'm hoping that he can get a few more games under his belt, possibly starts. I know that Martinelli is rumored to possibly be out hurt. I think it's the kind of thing that if he gets up to speed mentally with what the 11 is trying to do, with what Arteta expects of him, then all of the talent and capabilities are still well within his means to be able to go and do exactly what Arteta is expecting from a left winger to bring, Martinelli rest and do what we need to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Your first point there about Sterling maybe not being quite an Arteta specific player, I can get behind. Make no mistake, he was a player who was brought in to be sort of last minute depth. There's a reason why we signed him so late into the transfer window. And he was there for that coverage that, again, we need, just like we're talking about, against the teams like Southampton at home. He wasn't brought in as a long-term 4 or 5 year contract player. And again, I think part of that is because when Arteta has these long-term plans for players like Mikel Merino, for players like when he brought in Odegaard, when he brought in Kai Havertz, those are players who are emphatically for the collective. They are players who get stuck in the duels. They are players who are up there with the most distance traveled in the Premier League or La Liga, if I'm speaking on Merino last year. Again, I think Merino had the highest dual win rate or sheer duels won in all of Europe last year for midfielders. And again, you can point to any statistic about pitch distance covered for Odegaard and Havertz, as well as duels won, to back up that claim as well. So those are really Arteta players. Those are the paradigms of what Arteta wants in someone he brings in. And I think, Jack, to your point, Sterling is more of when we need quality in match weeks where we need to rotate and rest someone like Martinelli, another Arteta player. Can we bring someone who simply has the sheer quality to get us over the line? And I think Sterling, again, still in the early days of getting himself sorted and figuring out what the ideals of Arteta's system are. He is a good choice to have, and he will prove useful over the coming months. I thought that the first 10-15 minutes or so were really promising from him. I thought that he was eager to get on the ball. He was willing to make things happen. He did have the one penalty shout that surely was never going to be given, but it was on the back of a good pressing structure that he was a part of, showing again he's learning how to implement himself in this system, as well as after beating 2 or 3 players, showing that he has the capability to do what we need to against these sides. He scored against was it Bolton we played in the League Cup? I believe it was Bolton. I could be wrong. Was it? I think it was Bolton. And again, another example of when we need someone to step up, he's there to do so. Those are a lot of the positives that I think he brings. Energy, willingness to take on his man and be sort of a pure winger, and just general ability. Some of the cons that I saw from this game, like you said, Jack, were maybe being someone who knows that he has won and been in this position many times before. How do I find the words to describe this a little more delicately? Like, he is someone who has won so many times. He doesn't need to maybe play for a manager. He's someone who maybe has a year or 2 left and can come out and show what he has still within himself as a player on the left wing. Art, I do want to hear what you have to say about Sterling. Sterling's pros and cons, what he brings, maybe what he doesn't, and how that showed in the Southampton match.
I mean, I'm a very biased person in this topic. It seems like I'm the only one who didn't like the signing, at least online and everything. So I don't want to turn this into a hate fest, because he's not a bad player by any sense of the means. I don't want to say, I was about to say he doesn't bring the team down, but I think he brings the team down, but that's just me hating. So again, I don't want to say it as if it's fact or, I have statistics to back that up. I just think he's a bit too old, even with his experience, to, I don't know, really improve our team. It's more just kind of like a placeholder player. And
yeah,
granted, I don't know his contract, but I'm assuming his wages are high. And I think I don't know if I said it already on this episode. I might have said it before, but I would rather try to give a younger person more experience, because I think especially the younger team we had 3-4 years ago are very experienced now. Even though it's just been 3-4 years, they're no longer the young team that challenged for the title. They've been this title challenging position. This is like their third time now, so they're already like leaders for the next generation of the like 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds coming up into the starting. I was the starting 11, but like the starting 18, 23, whichever the
Sure.
reserves and
Momentum.
stuff. So yeah, you get the idea. But yeah, I fortunately didn't. Sterling was Sterling. He played how I expected Sterling to play. I still don't blame him for that goal inherently. Football is football. There's a lot of moving parts, moving pieces. It's never just one person's fault. Honestly, it kind of reminded me of being a kid or a teenager, and your coach puts you in like the position you always wanted to play, and you finally get the ball. You're like, don't fuck this up, don't fuck this up, and then you fuck it up. So I'm not gonna come at him too much, as much as I want to, but I won't. I'll keep it professional.
Yeah. I do have a couple things to say on that. Like with Sterling, first of all, I agree. Like he's not. I see some of the petulance. Maybe if that's a harsh word, then I do apologize for using it. But like, I saw it against Spurs, and I gave him sort of a pass, and that it was his first game out there, big occasion. If you go down, I understand staying down, but there were a few times during the match where sort of the opposite of what you'd see with Martinelli, where when our left winger goes down, when Martinelli is there, he's up and he is sprinting back with 110%. He's covering the left back position. We are winning that ball back because he knows that Arteta will hook him if that does not happen. With Sterling, and this happened on the goal too, which I don't want to be too biased because, of course, you're going to isolate and really analyze the goals that do happen more than just the standard plays. But again, the same thing happened where he lost in a position where you simply can't lose it. And when you lose it, you have to be up and pressing right away. I'll give him a little bit of slack in that I don't think that our rest defense was doing what they needed to, and our transition was not as good to recover as it should have been, and maybe as it typically is. But regardless, before getting into all of that, I do want to say that with Sterling, that goal really did embody a little bit, I'll use the word again, of the petulance that is a little bit concerning, and what he shows to not be an Arteta trait that he has. I know we were talking before this, Arda, about how you're bringing in a veteran, for a year or two. Jorginho is the guy who you bring in for that maturity, for that levity to really bring up the group, sort of cognitively, I guess, for lack of a better term. Make no mistake, Sterling on this 1-year deal where we are only covering 100K of his contract and still get a good player who can come in and bring quality when he gets his legs under him. That is an opportunistic signing more than anything, especially on a year. Believe me, if it was a 3-year deal like the first rumblings were mentioning, I would be probably completely against it because this is a guy who is past his best. But given that it's a 1-year loan, given that Chelsea are still covering a majority of his wages, given the recognition of it being more opportunistic than anything to help us get over the lines in these filler matches, and still proving to be a bit of quality, again, especially as we saw in the first half, I get it. And that's enough to make me look past maybe some of the poor decisions he made, maybe some of the lack of directness that we would like to see based on what we know he has done at City and his earlier Chelsea days. I give him a pass there. Jack, is there anything on Sterling?
No, I think I kind of tend to lean towards your side with, I think he does have the ability. Again, it's just, I'll find myself agreeing with Arda, I think, more if another 2 months from now, it's still a lot of the same issues. Right now, I'm trying to stay optimistic. I feel like in moments, I'm seeing spurts of the player that I want to see. And I think, is that only his second appearance? Or how many appearances does he have in the Prem? It was 1 start and 1 appearance against
Spurs. I know he saw the fields for.
I think he came off the bench another time, though, but I don't know if I'm tripping.
Was it Leicester?
So maybe
he might have.
It might have been Leicester. I think
probably.
It was.
So 3 or 4 max appearances. Again, he's kind of getting to that point where I want to start,
maybe. Yeah,
I want to start seeing the identity. I see the moments, and I'm sure the goals and assists will come, especially, if he continues to play the game that he's playing. But I want to see it over a full 90. I want to see the identity. I want to see, I don't want to say personality shift because you don't want to change players inherently, but I want to see an Arsenal player for the rest of the season. That's kind of kind of where I sit with Sterling right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of, again, on those two, and it seems like we've been overtly negative with the stuff that we've said about Jesus and Sterling. But at the end of the day, honestly, from what I saw, and we haven't even really dove into the tactics yet, but what we saw with the early press, what we saw with their eagerness on the ball, those are the things that you still want to see from your players. So I am with you, Jack, in that I am still remaining overly positive about what I am expecting and what I think they will give us in spurts throughout the season. If you look at the Jesus assist to Trossard last year, if you can get a Jesus moment deep in the Champions League in a quarterfinal, a semifinal like that, even once a season, you take it.
Ask for.
Assuming he does that. If you get a moment like that from Sterling against, say we have Bayern in the semifinal, the UCL, or Real in the quarterfinal, if you get a moment from him where he can show that quality that he does have, you take it and you run with it. We have our core group of starters who are going to sort of trudge forward with the main identity and get us in those situations. But sometimes you do need those rotation players to come on and give us those bits and pieces of quality that we know they have. Jesus off of injury, Sterling off of lack of game time. We'll give him more time to sort of bake. I really hope, and I know this is impossible to ask of Arsenal social media in general, but we'll ask that they stay off their backs and that we just continue to pump support into them, because they're two players who I think emphatically want to help the team. With that, Arda, go ahead.
Have you seen any hate on Jesus? I mean, I'm one of the Sterling haters. I mean, I'm not on Twitter hating on the guy, but
right.
I haven't seen anything with Jesus at the very least.
I think it's just more of a frustration, and I get the frustration given the player that we know. It's a player who I saw a lot after PSG as well. Made some bad decisions, again, maybe trying to overcompensate for his drop in form by doing too much on the ball and trying to facilitate too much play. Maybe a little analogous to how Kane drops too deep and hinders the play of those around him by monopolizing the ball, so to speak. I understand the frustration, but again, you have to recognize that this is a player who, if and when he gets up to his top form, is someone who can do the things that we need him to do against the very best in the world. So that's sort of the side I'm staying on. Southampton, again, maybe just emphasized some of that debate a little bit more, for better or for worse. Regardless, it's more minutes for the two of them and 3 points for us. 3 points on the back of great performances from players who Arsenal fans are loving right now, Saka and Havertz. Jack, would you like to start on what Saka gave us in this match and what he's been giving us this whole season?
I do not have the words for Saka this season, man. He is, if I let the statistics speak for themselves, then I guess it will kind of do the talking for me. He's doing things that players literally have never done before. I think I saw that this is the first time in Premier League history. I'm not sure if it's since the statistics were measured or if it's in Prem history. Regardless, crazy either way, that a player for 2 weeks running has scored, or I believe it's created 7 chances and taken 7 shots, or created 7 shots.
Yeah, I think it was against the Leicester game. I think it was 8 chances created and 8 players beaten. And it was the first time since the data's been recorded. And again, that was against Leicester. I don't know if it was, you said it was 2 weeks running, so maybe that happened again against Southampton.
I think he created another 7 chances against Southampton, and it was something about the chance creation. I forget the other little tidbit. Regardless, it's insane. You put a goal on top of a performance like that too. It's just like
and an assist to boot.
Obviously an assist, yeah, but you're not talking about a player who is, he's young and he's going to be great one day. You're talking about a player who is hitting the peak of his career at the right time, and not that he has to prove this to anyone, but he is proving that he is quite literally with the top of the top of the top, not only in his position, but in the entire world, in the game of football in general.
Let me, if I can find this real quick. I know I just had it up because it was amongst players who... It was amongst, I don't know if it was amongst every player in the world or if it was just amongst selected names, but now that I have it here, this is amongst, I'm going to read off a few names. Kylian Mbappe, Erling Haaland, Jude Bellingham, Vinicius Jr., and Bukayo Saka. Shot creating actions per 90. Bukayo Saka, 5.56. Kylian Mbappe, 4.36. Jude Bellingham, 4.04. Vinny Jr. 3.91, Erling Haaland 2.08. And what I don't want to do is get too far in and misrepresent the data that I'm seeing, because I understand that you have 3 players from one team. There are only so many shots that you can create. But what I do want to say is that, again, putting him up against these players on stats like this, or goals and assists, Vinny Jr. had 30, Bukayo Saka had 33 last year. Jude Bellingham just one ahead with 34. This is a player who, when you put him up against these Ballon d'Or nominees, who he is one of as well, and when you put him up against these superstars and global names, he not only holds his own against them, he supersedes them. He completely controls games. He does everything correctly, and this is, I don't want to get too far off topic, but this is my issue with some of the Bukayo Saka dialogue. He's not a player who you can go into a Twitter sort of compilation and see everything, but when you watch him week in, week out, you see him make the correct decision on my life every single time. And you see him do it with absolute precision, passes on the right foot, dribbles just beyond his defender. He does it flawlessly. The peaks of his game aren't his sort of flashy, tidbits where he's doing step overs to beat a player or send one down, but he will beat that player. And when he beats that player, he'll make the correct pass after beating that player to the correct foot of the player who's receiving the ball. And he doesn't just do it once or twice, he does it every time he receives the ball. And make no mistake, he's receiving the ball many times a game because all of our play goes through Bukayo Saka. This is a player who genuinely, I think, and I know this is some debate going along, I think that we have not had a player since I've started watching, including Alexis Sanchez, including Mesut Ozil, including Robin van Persie, who has played as consistently at this level at the club. And we've seen Bukayo Saka since the start of this season. And I can genuinely say that. I would speak for about 20 more minutes if I don't pass it off now. Arda, is there anything on Bukayo Saka's level since the start of this year? Because I think it's above anything we've seen.
I'll start off with 2 weird takes, I guess. Well, one's controversial, one is weird. The controversial one, I don't know if it's controversial, but I think he's the best right winger in the world right now. I could not name you a better right winger, personally. I don't. Does Real Madrid have a right winger? Is it?
I mean, you could throw out Lamine Yamal. You could throw out Mohamed Salah.
There's no shot though. Like no. Like that's what I'm telling you. Like Mo Salah once upon a time for sure, but that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like Saka overtook him at this
right
point.
now,
And it's not.
I think so.
It's not like an attack on Mo Salah. It's just Saka is really I think you worded it very perfectly. He hit his prime at the right time. Like he's really grown into the player. Secondly, based on what you said too, I don't know if this is gonna make any sense, but he kind of reminds me of Busquets in the sense that you don't really see what he provides unless you consistently watch him play.
Yeah.
And like you see how much like his team relies on him, which is even crazier for Saka because like for Busquets' position, it's hard for him to even like build up statistics to show his worth in like the center defensive mid role, the center mid role that he played. But Saka, he has those assists, he has the expected goals, the expected assists, chances created, all that. And like you said, he's so consistent with it. To go back to the Southampton game, he like both those assists, they're not like picture perfect, but he gets the ball, opens up to look across the field, gives a pass either towards the middle or all the way towards the far post. Both of them end up in goals. First goal with Havertz had to put a little work into it, but Saka's far post long balls are always so dangerous. Even when the person does not connect to it, you see the other team's defense looking over like, oh shit, and like you can see the lethalness behind the ball's trajectory. Like he is unbelievably like one of the best at that ball, the far post through ball, cross, whatever you want to call it. He's so good, and yeah, he just blows me away. You made a crazy take saying he's been the most consistent out of all those players. Robin van Persie is the only one I'm like kind of iffy on.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm gonna give it to Saka because he's more loyal and fuck RVP.
Yep.
Jack, I'll let you speak on Saka now.
Yeah, I like your point about. I feel like it's an easy point, or it's a popular point to make about Saka, that he's the kind of player that you have to watch week in, week out to truly get the whole idea of what he is as a right winger. And I really like your point about Busquets. This is a guy that just does not make the wrong decisions. He you could do, let's say you're comparing two compilations of different players and you're doing like a Doku versus Saka. You could make a minute comp of each player, and Doku with his
Looks like, yeah.
with his athleticism and his moments, sure, whatever. Saka,
You could go in the
I'm
Palmer
not.
direction.
I'm not.
I have some words to say on Palmer. If you wanted to go in the Palmer direction, I think I could handle it.
I almost don't want to entertain it, but
Exactly.
Also very valid. That's also very valid.
The direction I was gonna go with Saka was that, like, tactically speaking, you can study the game and learn your players and your best 11 inside and out to try to find solutions for where to strategically place players so that you have the best overload and what sort of areas of the pitch you're really trying to attack to get the best out of each player. But easier than that is just knowing that you have Bukayo Saka on the right wing, and you know that other teams have to put two men on him, and you're going to have someone free. It doesn't hurt that typically ends up at the back post where Saka is so good on the ball. It's just when you have a player who is so smart, who always needs to be doubled and is taking up so many men from the other team, you really see the value that he provides, where, again, even if he's not beating 6-7 men or sprinting by other teams' defenders or whoever is playing a low block or whatever, this is a player who demands that there are 2 or 3 men on him, or he'll make something happen. Or, how do I word this? Either 2 to 3 men will be on him, or he's going to play the right ball, or he's going to find. Guys, I'm running in circles here.
I think I'll help you. Like, I'll put it this way: every shot he takes is a dangerous shot. He does not take a shot that's not dangerous. Like,
every action is dangerous. Exactly.
Like, if you don't press him, he'll press up and shoot. If you press him, he'll make a dangerous pass. Like, he creates options out of no options.
Right. Exactly.
And my thing too is, like, if I may, like, people talk about, we've talked, and I think a lot of Arsenal fans will dote on how much we value his back post cross. Again, why? Because they get us goals. They get us goals on corners. They get us goals through Martinelli's winner against Southampton. Other fans, for whatever reason, through whatever mental gymnastics they want to try to discredit him through, they somehow don't give him credit on those, and they say, like, oh, how many of these assists or how many of these are from set pieces. He still has the most open play chances created in the league. So there's that.
I hate throwing this out there too, but clearly those people have never taken a set piece in their fucking lives.
Yeah,
and I hate putting that out there, but, like,
it still requires quality. That it still takes a certain level of talent to be able to pull it off. Why do you think we score so many? Why do you think Gabriel is able to get on the end of so many corners? It's because Bukayo Saka, without fail, just like he consistently does so many other things, also consistently puts the ball on these set pieces that Nicolas Jover draws up into the areas that they need to go in. And again, even if you want to entertain, which we shouldn't, but even if you want to entertain the mental gymnastics of the opponent fans who say this guy's better because he doesn't rely on set pieces, again, we still have the highest open play chance creator in the league. You can take out all the corners. He still has the highest chances created. In open play, you see what he has to do, again, to your point, Jack, with the 2 men that are always on him to create those chances. So you run out of superlatives with him, and on top of this, again, against Southampton, he gets his goal late, which can shut up another argument where people say, oh, this guy's better because he scores more goals. I can't have it because, again, you watch these games consistently. You see what Bukayo Saka has to do to control these games. We're not talking he's controlling games for a team whose expectations are to finish 5th or try to push for a Europa League spot. We're talking about a guy whose expectations are to drive a team forward, who is pushing for the title, pushing for the UCL, and he does it, and he does it emphatically well. He does it against the best teams in the world, and he does it essentially without error. That's Bukayo Saka. Again, the more I think about it from our conversation last week, the more I have him as my undisputed player of the season, and the more I really just hope that there's no injury for the Bournemouth game coming up, and further, no injuries in the future to the knee or anything like that could keep him out or put him on the wrong trajectory, because he is that good.
Hey, before we move on, I'm going to make another wild take and another Barca take. For me, he's almost kind of like Messi-esque without the Messi magic. You know what I like? Hear me out.
You don't like that.
He's not gonna like no touch dribble or whatever the stupid shit people call it, but he's not gonna dribble through a whole team or anything like that. But he has that I'm on the field, and just because I'm on the field, I change the game type of effect to him. You can call it the Ronaldo effect too, whatever you want to call it, Pele effect, Maradona effect, the superstar effect. You're on the field. There's a certain like aura presence, and you change the game just by being on the field.
Play goes through you. He dictates it. He does what he needs to do, and he does it flawlessly. I feel like again, that's what Arsenal fans will describe Bukayo Saka at every chance offered to him. And now, sort of transitioning to Havertz, that's something that is becoming more frequently for that guy too. For someone who, at the beginning, the first few months of his tenure here, that certainly wasn't the case. So certainly want to also touch on Havertz, touch on his complete change in form since becoming our full number 9, evolving into this guy who, again, very altruistically gives back to the team what we need to get from him. Someone who, just like Jesus and Sterling, offers so much energy, but also offers a clinicality and offers this very high level that you need from a 9 to compete for these titles. Obviously got the equalizer. Jack, what did you make from Havertz in this match? What do you make of Havertz from the last few months, really?
Yeah, it's the same Havertz we've been seeing. It's a world-class number 9. It's someone who fits the Arsenal mold perfectly. Both, to your point, obviously we were saying where Jesus and Sterling maybe only have one of the either on the ball or sort of mental side of the game. Havertz just has them both down, and he's the exact number 9 that the club needs, especially with Odegaard being out. I think he's sort of taken on a lot more responsibility. He's been drifting more towards Saka. And you can see how that relationship has sort of built over the past, month or so since Odegaard's been out. He's the kind of player that will just kind of open up a field. If you need him to win a header or flick something on, he'll do it. He'll go into duels. He'll be physical. If you need him to be on the ball too, he's shown that he can do that as well. He is just building up, every facet of his game. And I think it's really good to see that he's still able to sort of do that even without Odegaard. I like seeing him come, and a lot of the conversation behind Odegaard and Saka sort of playing in a similar space, not to go on a tangent, is how Saka doesn't really have someone to do a lot of the running and dragging for him. That's why I like Havertz kind of drifting over here, and I think that's why we've seen so much output from the two of them.
Guys.
Yeah, I think that's why we've seen so much from them in the past month or so, is because Havertz's profile and his willingness to do what is needed to get the best out of the players around him is what is opening up the pitch so much and allowing players like Saka to do what they do best and be on the ball more and have more open space to create chances. And not only is it helping someone like Saka, it's not inadvertently, it's directly helping someone like Havertz get more on the goals and assists as well, on top of performances that are better than we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, Havertz, I'm sure that this is a stat that you guys have seen as it's been circulating around football Twitter a bit. He now in 2024, or perhaps since he's moved to 9, which would have been late 2023, but nonetheless has more non-penalty goals and assists than Erling Haaland. Last thing I want to do is openly state for the world to hear that I think that Havertz is better than Haaland, because quite frankly, I don't think that that's the case. But what I will say is that for the system that Arteta runs and for the things that we need our number 9 to do, truly, I don't think that there's another number 9 out there that I would take in world football, including but not limited to Erling Haaland, instead of Kai Havertz. I really don't. He, like you said, Jack, especially in this new sort of 4-4-2 scenario, and we can dive into a little bit of the tactics after, because I have a lot to say about what we did in the Southampton game, with this being one of them. Havertz directly runs through channels. He drops into midfield. He goes off to the right-hand side. He wins his duels. First of all, big thing, he competes in his duels, something that he does to a much higher level and much more frequently than Erling Haaland. Is able to get the best out of Bukayo Saka by dragging those players away. And at the end of the day, when he needs to score the goals, as he has been doing since shifting to that number 9 position, he does score the goals. Whether it's the late back post headers that we've seen against Brentford, whether it's the thumping goals that we just saw against Southampton, or the tap-ins where positioning is the best, like against Newcastle or Man United, Or apologies, I think he assisted Trossard against Man United, but still, statement still stands. He has done everything that we needed him to do and more. With RVP just sort of freshly in mind, he's now also matched RVP's record for most consecutive home matches scored in at the Emirates. I believe now he's on 6 or 7. But fortunately, we can just sort of throw him right at the top of the list so that we don't have to remember that other guy's name. So again, Havertz, just like Saka, running out of superlatives. He's been fantastic. And for someone who had so many questions coming in, he's starting to look like a 65 million bargain, truly. Art, any takes?
I think you guys really nailed everything. The only few things I want to add is I think the reason why he fits the Arsenal system so well, like you said, especially for a striker we're looking for, maybe I'm stretching it here, but comes from his background as being a midfielder in his earlier days in his career. And especially when it comes to covering for Odegaard now that he's injured and working with Saka, working with the midfield. I think it helps him see the runs better and really make the better plays instead of, your Erling Haaland, which is kind of just run through the defense and run towards the goal. I don't watch enough Man City, maybe that's just me overgeneralizing their play style. Yeah. You know what I mean? But you get the point. Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to say that, again, that's why I'm reluctant to call Kai Havertz a better player than Erling Haaland, because it turns into like a jack of all trades, master of none type thing, where Havertz does everything that we need him to do, which is very involved. Our number 9 needs to do a lot of things, including the things that we just said. Running the channels, dragging players away from our wingers to enable them to do the things that we need them to, as well as scoring, occupying those half spaces for those late headers, winning duels. Bear in mind, Erling Haaland, a lot of what he needs to do is get on the end of play facilitated by such a dominant possession-based form of football that Pep Guardiola implements. And obviously, I'm stating the obvious here. No one is better at finishing those types of plays than Erling Haaland. So, of course, for that system, they wouldn't take Kai Havertz. But I think at the crux of what I'm saying is that I don't know for our system if we take Erling Haaland. Would I, gun to my head? Probably still. But given that cannot happen, and it won't happen, having Kai Havertz is... I am so fortunate that we do have Kai Havertz at the club, because he does everything that we need him to, and then some, to such a high standard. So, really, and again, we haven't even really spoken on the goal that he scored, which I think, more than just the quality of the goal itself, I think that the reaction to the goal is what I love so much about having him at the club. He immediately, no celebration, no off to the fans, no nothing. He told everyone, get back, job's not finished type of thing. That goes back. He was in tears against Everton on the last match of the season. This is a guy who also stated that winning the UCL for Arsenal would mean more than it did for Chelsea, which is music to my ears. I love to hear it.
Awesome.
This is a guy who wants to succeed at Arsenal. He wants to succeed for Arteta's Arsenal. He wants to win over the fans. He already has won over the fans. The last thing we need for him is to get us to that silverware. Anything else from either of you guys on Havertz or Saka? Really the two highlights of that match.
I mean, we could talk all day about them, but I feel like we covered it. Just
we made enough glazed donuts today.
Yeah,
I agree. That sort of brings us into our next sort of thing, and this next topic sort of brings us also into looking forward into what our next matches are and who's going to be available. But it starts with Partey being our right back option against Southampton. And this wasn't like a tactical thing. It wasn't everyone was available, and Arteta had ideas to just have Partey in there instead of Timber and White, but it was thrust upon him through lack of fitness, and something that we could see against Bournemouth, but I believe everyone's going to be fit, so we'll get into that. Real quickly, I don't... Oh, yeah.
Tomiyasu's still hurt? I just want clarification on that.
I think
Tomiyasu's gotten re-injured against Southampton for another month.
Which is why I just wanted to read clarification.
You just want to give him a hug. Yeah, you just want to give him a hug sometimes, because I do love Tommy. I think he's a great player, not to delineate from our conversation too much, but since we brought him up, Tommy is a player who, because we won't talk about him in a lot of other contexts since he's out so much, who is so versatile, strong, fast, good in the tackle, tactically intelligent. If he's a player with all of his traits who can play 40 to 50 times a season, I think he's a 40 to 50 million player. I really do. And it's such a shame that his knees and his legs are made of glass, because when he plays like he did in the run-in last year, where we won all of our games right up to the end of the season, he was our undisputed starting fullback. Scored against Everton on the last day. And it really does suck because I rate him so highly. I really do. And you can look at the mistakes that led to the De Bruyne goal 2 seasons back, but I feel like if he didn't go out with injury when Saliba also went out and he was our starting center back, I feel like we very well could have and maybe would have won the league that season. That's more speculatory, but I never make an excuse to go away from Tomiyasu dialogue whenever given the chance. So just wanted to say that.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No, you're good. You're good. But with that in mind, Tomiyasu was out, as were White, as were Timber. So Partey started at fullback, and Partey is someone who I think has actually had a really strong start to the season. There are a lot of fitness questions. I do think that he looks a step behind maybe his athleticism from 22-23 or when we first bought him back in 2020 and 2021. But with that, I think that his role in this team, he helps facilitate a lot of deep buildup by dropping between the center backs and helping that overload when we first start transitioning up the pitch. I think that he does that almost second to none. He's a very good player at doing those things. He's a player who's tactically trusted by Arteta, and he's very good at line splitting and beating the press. Again, if his athleticism was there, we'd be talking about one of the best midfielders in the world. Athleticism isn't there, so we're talking about instead someone who can simply do the job, which is all we need him to do, and he's done it pretty well this season. Jack, what do you make about Thomas Partey's overall form this year, as well as his stint at right back against Southampton?
It's a very small sort of sample size. I feel like Partey at right back. What I'll say about the player is that I like his footballing brain. He's pleasing to watch. He's the kind of guy where when he's on the ball, you kind of sit on the edge of your seat because you know the ball is going forward and you know something is going to happen. Arteta has obviously kind of shown the fan base that Partey is a player where if he's fit, he's almost always going to be on the first 11 sheet. Right when he was fit towards the end of the run in last season, he played, I believe it was our last 6 or 7 prem games to see out last season. He's played I think he started every game this season. If I'm not,
All
besides
right.
maybe Bolton, I mean the big ones.
Yeah, but sounds just about right, yeah.
He's just obviously the kind of guy who is going to play games when he's fit. And they're not even at the same position either. We have no right backs. Instead of playing, whoever else we could play there. Maybe a center back. Exactly right. Partey's going to play there because Arteta obviously values what he can do on the ball, and it's obviously no secret the value that he does provide sitting behind the play, facing play, with the ball at his feet. I would argue, obviously, we haven't seen much of Marino, and I do think Declan Rice is underrated on the ball. Obviously, Odegaard's hurt, but all that being said, I do think Partey is our best specialist with the ball at his feet, trying to break lines, especially with a lot of the low blocks that we do end up playing. I don't mind Partey.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but I do think Zinchenko, when he's playing, does offer some of that. And against the real low blocks, before we were sort of figured out in 22-23, I think that Zinchenko Partey duo where we were breaking lines from both sides was obviously unstoppable, and it was because we were on 100-point pace. But I'll digress and I'll let you continue.
Yeah, and then there was just too little athleticism, right? Teams kind of figured us out. They were running us into the ground. And that is the one sort of chief complaint about Partey, especially when he's playing in the middle of the park, is that I think back to the game against Villa when Morgan Rogers was having his day. Quite literally, it seemed like a man against a boy, just sort of being ran past. And that is a huge issue of Partey. Obviously, he's 31. You're not going to expect the same performances, athletically speaking. But you look at a player like Jorginho, who knows that that's his limitation. He knows how to position himself on the pitch when he is out there to not always be sort of caught in those running battles. That's my thing on Partey. I like what he provides on the ball. If our outside backs are injured and we can sort of manipulate how we set up, keep Partey on the pitch, I guess I'm a fan of it, as long as his athleticism isn't getting in the way, which, again, not to go into a tangent, but seems to be less of an issue where our back three, even though Calafiori does invert Calafiori offers us a lot of athleticism on the other side, which I think does help offset that a bit. Does Murillo, of course, when playing.
I have a few things to say on that. The first thing probably being is that, yes, Partey's athleticism is the number one thing. I agree in that. I think that he's our best on-the-ball progressor, and he does do that. Again, he drops deep. He facilitates deep build-up. Odegaard also does that. So with him out, Partey's really taken on a lot of that responsibility with Rice higher up the pitch. The one concern is, again, like you said, Morgan Rogers, that performance really stuck in my mind as it has for many others, because he was dominating Partey out there, and he was just swiftly going by him just about every time he was on the ball. And it makes you really wonder what kind of damage some of those other midfields can do. I mean, you think about someone like Fede Valverde, you think about someone like Jude Bellingham, who will pick up, occupy similar areas against Thomas Partey, and will drive probably past him with relative ease. So the question is, and this is an open-ended one, more of a hypothetical, is how do we get the best out of our deep build-up, considering Partey is very efficient and has been very efficient with it this year, while also protecting ourselves from the transitional vulnerability that sometimes we are subject to when he's out on the pitch. And so some people are obviously saying, well, when Odegaard's back and when Marino's up to full fitness, I think that Partey just comes out of the field and Rice becomes our main six. But if there's anything that Arteta's shown us, it's that I don't know if Rice as a long-term six is his number one sort of set-in-stone priority going forward. Again, that's why I'm leaving this open-ended, a little more hypothetical, because I don't think I have an answer for that. I really don't know how things are going to change. But for right now, I think that we've been fortunate with the level Partey's been playing at. Maybe a little fortunate that his athleticism hasn't been exposed, or maybe a little naive, and maybe I'm just not seeing the little nuances that Arteta's implemented to maybe secure us and protect us from those vulnerabilities. Does that make sense?
I think,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, he's only played right back against, like, not, I don't want to say weaker teams, but, weaker teams, not against, like, your Man Cities or unless, did he play right back against Man City? I think he did, right? Or
so he, at the beginning of last season, when I know Dave mentioned it was Ben White was going through fitness issues. I think Partey started one game there, and there was a lot of.
Sorry, Gabriel wasn't starting. No, it was Saliba and Ben White at center back.
That's exactly what it was. You're right. There was a huge dialogue around Partey, like being.
That was around the Saudi. Saudi had a bid for like 80 million. We didn't know if he was on the, which would have been. It sounds surreal saying that now, but yes.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts, but there was a lot of dialogue about Partey actually starting at right back, and then that's where he was going to invert from, and then Ben White was going to be the right back, Saliba the left center back, starting obviously not in game. Yeah, that kind of died down since, and this is because I think, was that when he got hurt, and that was kind of the end of that?
Timber got hurt, which meant that Zinchenko came back at left back, and then Gabriel had to come in for defensive solidity at left center back, which pushed Saliba right center back and Ben White back to right back. That's how that.
Yeah, that was the end of that. But I do think that I think we would have seen more Partey right back if circumstances would have allowed for it. And I think that's why we saw it then. I think that's why we saw it this past weekend.
Yeah. Put it this way, I don't think with a fully fit back line, like when we go and do our predictions very shortly for how we're going to set up in our next few games, Bournemouth, Shakhtar, Liverpool, I don't think we'll see Partey at right back. I'd be very shocked if Timber or White's injuries have persisted for so long, unless there's information that I'm not sure about. But I, for one, would like to see, and I think that Timber is our first choice right back, or left back against Liverpool, which again we'll get into, but I have some opinions there. But again, it sort of actually goes back to not Partey as a player, but Partey as a right back specifically. I think that shows, just like Jesus and Sterling did, when we're put up against the wall and when we have to tweak things against teams that we can tweak things against, can we do so? Because again, believe me, I think that Timber would have absolutely been starting, or Ben White would have absolutely been starting had this week been our Liverpool home match. I really do. But you get a little bit of leniency against teams that you should be beating at home. You go with it. You play okay. You get through. You get the 3 points. You do what you need to do. All right, I think I cut you off there. I'll let you continue.
Honestly, I forgot what I was gonna say because I think.
Or that's my bad.
Anyway, no, you're good. I mean, it's just a circumstantial thing, anyways. So I don't know. I don't really got much to say on it. As long as he doesn't cost us the league playing there,
Right.
I don't really have
The
a
fact
problem.
that it's sort of gone under the radar a bit is actually, and it didn't go under the radar prior to the match because,
Right.
again, we were thinking back to last season when his right back shifts weren't as good or the team performances weren't as good. I'm thinking back to that Fulham match that we dropped points that eventually cost us. But after the match, nothing really happened. Don't have to talk about it. That means he did his job. That means we can move on. So I agree.
Right.
Circumstantial. You get through it. Not much more else to say. I think that Partey has been a key role player, has played great in midfield, or good in midfield, I guess I would say. It was called upon him at fullback. And again, we have some more issues to figure out when Marino comes back, which I have written down here to go over, when Odegaard, after his setback, which I have written down here, comes back. We figure out how to really navigate those tough games where some of his vulnerabilities might be a little more exposed. But with that, I think that's our Southampton. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I have one more thing to pay homage to my brother. I'm just glad Partey's actually freaking playing this season. My brother and I had a running inside joke that he barely played. And last year his availability, maybe it was his availability, but like he played like every other game. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
at least he's seeing the pitch, and he's actually reminding us that he's more than just a PR problem for the club. That's all.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, black cloud sort of looming over, but that's not for us to talk about. That is what it is.
I don't want to get into that.
Yeah. Definitely agree. Well, with all that, I think that the fullback choice is actually the one that's the most interesting about how we'll set up in our next few games. So now I do want to transition, looking a little bit ahead here. I know we haven't talked on some of the players, but we will now. Calafiori, White, and Timber. We have 3 matches coming up. A few more after that. If I'm really looking ahead, you have Bournemouth, Shakhtar, Liverpool, and then is it Inter, Newcastle, Chelsea, something like that? I know that they're all in the near future.
Bournemouth, Shakhtar, Liverpool, Preston, Newcastle, and then Inter, Chelsea, and Nottingham Forest.
Well, let's put it this way. Timber, White, and Calafiori. Jack, I want to start with you. How many matches of the ones that Arda just said, the 7 or so, how many does Timber start at right back versus left back? How many does White start, I'm assuming just at right back? And how many does Calafiori start just at left back?
Oh, man. Okay, so I have the matches pulled up. So there's 7, and we have, in the Premier League alone, in order, it is Bournemouth, which is away, and then it's Liverpool, Newcastle, and Chelsea. And then in between those is home to Shakhtar in the Champions League, away to Preston in the EFL Cup, and then away to Inter. I imagine, given White and Timber's sort of injury progression this season, for lack of a better term, I imagine, best case scenario, Arteta probably hopes to start Calafiori in just about all of these games. That is my... Maybe, okay, let me asterisk. I don't think that Calafiori is going to start against Preston. I do think he'll get a rest.
Question. You say all the matches. Does that include Liverpool, where we will see Calafiori, whose defensive questions have certainly
in transition questionable? I think that Arteta... I saw something about... I've been looking a lot into Liverpool's underlying metrics. They are, I don't think by far, but they are the league leaders in not only expected goals, but in the game states. I believe I saw that the game states in which they're creating their XG. What was it? I think they were blowing away other teams in the XG that they're creating when the games are drawn, as opposed to when they're winning, and obviously the field opens up more. This is a team, they're going to attack, they're going to be able to create goals seemingly from nothing based on that. And obviously Van Dijk seems to be at his best this season. They're also very good defensively based on underlying metrics as well. They're just a good team. I think that because of what we will need going forward, although you can point to Calafiori's possible defensive liabilities or maybe like sort of brief lapses in moments, which scares me against Salah, I do think Calafiori will be nodded the start. It's a shame that Tomiyasu is not fit and doesn't have a few games to get ready, because I think in a perfect world, he's probably my Salah 1-to-1. but I think
Frankly, I
Calafiori
think
didn't
that
start.
Timber is a better one-on-one defender than Tomiyasu is.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess I'm sort of just letting my nostalgia glasses answer that because of how well Tomiyasu did against Sala last season. But I think what Calafiori offers us, I'm looking at these games. I think Arteta is going to want to call on him in at least 6 of the 7. And I think that Timber and White, depending, obviously, I'm not really sure where they stand with their injuries. I would imagine Timber would probably start about 4 or 5, and then White the remainder of them. So I go, I
I
guess,
do
what was it?
understand.
6-5-3 or something, which I don't think really adds up
6-5-3.
to the 21 games total, but you kind of get the point I'm going for.
We'll pull up here. So again, I'm seeing, Bournemouth, Shakhtar, Liverpool, Preston, Newcastle, Inter, Chelsea. So I do think that I'm going to assume that our defenders are back to match fitness. This very well could be wrong, but I'm going to assume, like you did, that they're fully fit. I think Calafiori, undisputed left back against Bournemouth. I'll say that Timber starts right back against Bournemouth. I think that we do the same against Shakhtar. And I think against Liverpool, we go with Timber at left back and Ben White at right back.
Yeah, you
Against
know what? I actually
Houston,
kind of
I
like
think
the
we have
sound of
a
that.
complete shake-up. I think we probably go Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back, and I think we go Josh Nichols again at right back.
Yep.
Possibly for minutes, we could go Ben White at right back. And then Newcastle, I think we go... Newcastle's an interesting one because they do have... who is their right winger this year? Is Gordon playing off the left? And would that mean...
Oh, Gordon's been there 9 a lot, I've seen, and then Harvey Barnes off the left.
Would that make Isak playing off the right? Is he drifting out there a bit?
He's been out. I'm not sure if he'll be back, but I don't think he's been playing.
I would say I would play it safe, and I would go Calafiori, Ben White for Newcastle, and then I would go Calafiori, Timber for Inter, and Calafiori, Timber for Chelsea. So I think that Calafiori, like you said, probably starts about 5 or 6. Timber probably starts about 4 or 5, and White starts about 2 or 3. And Art, I'll let you take the next hack at it.
I don't know, man. I'm not that into it like you guys are, to be real with you. I'll just be happy to see both Timber and Calafiori starting all games. You know, I'm a career mode player. I want my starters in there all the time.
Yeah.
But unrealistic, I know. But that's just how I like to see it. I mean, I guess I wouldn't mind seeing Party for Bournemouth.
Wouldn't mind that either. I really wouldn't.
Or for Preston, even though they're both away games. Now that I take a look, but Newcastle always scares me. I don't even care like what their current form is. Whenever we play them, I feel like they always just give Arsenal a good game.
They do. It's a good match, and it's away to St. James Park. It's a very tough stadium to go to. We'll have the mentality from last season, and we'll bring that with us.
And Newcastle Arsenal is always a set piece battle, which is like a nerve-wracking part of it.
Big physical transition, but it's going to be a battle. You know, I look at these fixtures, and the next thing I honestly want to do is I want to ask how many points we get in our next 7, because I think that this is like our earlier one where we did very well. You know, our shift of City and Spurs and PSG and Atalanta, we did pretty well. Beyond the starters and who our selection is, how many points do you think we get from these matches that are coming up? This one, I will start with you, Arda. If you have a little more.
So real quick, just for clarification, are we just doing like Premier League games? So like Bournemouth, Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea?
All the games. Yeah, just go through how we'll do win, loss, draw against each of the prospective opponents.
Just to get it out the way, the EFL Cup, since it's a bracket, not a table, I just think we win that in advance to round of 8. Easy peasy. Yeah. I think Shakhtar will only be like 1-0 win. To be honest, I think Bournemouth could be 3-0 easy. Liverpool, I could see us taking 1 point, but honestly, I think we need all 3. So I'm gonna say like we take all 3. I don't think we play for a draw there at all. Newcastle though, again. Yeah, I think I'll be bold. I think we get all 3 points everywhere except Inter. I think we draw Inter.
It's bold, yeah. That's fair.
1-1.
Inter's a very good team. I look at this and I see Inter as the toughest team, possibly
same
Newcastle away, and Chelsea have good underlying, but I do see Inter as the toughest team here. Away at the Miazza, that'll be a tough match, no doubt.
I think Chelsea and Liverpool are self-explanatory too. You know, they're not easy games per se, but like you know what to expect.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, Jack, what do you take?
I feel like I'm sort of blocking this next group of games into the first 4 and the last 3. My hope and my expectation for Bournemouth, Shakhtar, Preston are obviously wins, and I also think that home to Liverpool, I imagine with the games that come before and come after, I also think that we're going to get 3 points there. That said, realist in me is looking at an away trip to Newcastle, an away trip to Inter, and an away trip to Chelsea in the span of 8 days. And something is telling me we're leaving with 4 points. Not to be a doomer. And I don't think, especially if we win the 4 before, then... Because if you spread those games out and put them individually over the course of the season, 4 points, especially going away to Inter, would not really be the end of the world. I just think that it's important to, if we can get 6 points, I'd say if we can win 2 of those, or even like a win, draw, whatever the case is, would be like very good. We're not going to get 9 points, and you can clip this if I'm wrong, and you can call me out for being such a pessimist, but I think it is the hardest 3-game stretch of our entire season.
I think Inter is one of the best teams in the world. I mean, I don't know if people just don't talk about them enough. You know, I think getting a point from them would be a great result, in my opinion.
That'd be crazy.
I saw a take on Twitter that I actually really liked. I think that away at Inter, and I'm not sure how they've started the Serie A this season, but I think that away at Inter is probably a top 3 hardest match that Arteta, the current Arteta with the current Arsenal 11, which I would say stretches back like 2.5, 3 years at this point, not since he came into the club. I would say that this current away trip to Inter is probably a top 3 hardest match that this new Arteta Arsenal will play, and it's up there with current day City. Take any of your picks from the last couple of years, and the Bayern draw from last season. And I think Inter is right after those. I'm very excited for them.
I agree. I mean, I think we do. I agree with that. I think that those first 4 games have to include 3 Premier League victories. Or sorry, is it the first 5? Liverpool?
The first 5.
Or Bournemouth, Shakhtar, Arsenal, and Preston. I think that we need 2 Premier League victories, Liverpool and Bournemouth. I think that we need a win in the Champions League home to Shakhtar, and I think we need to advance in the Cup. Again, something about Newcastle away, Inter away, Chelsea. Geez, even saying it sounds absolutely brutal.
Yeah, it's insane.
Something about that.
I think we're beating Chelsea.
Points.
Maybe I'm a bit too optimistic. I think we clear Chelsea.
Chelsea looks like the easiest fixture there, to be honest. Their underlyings are good, but I think that we can navigate it. I think I take I don't know how I would want the 4 points to be split up. But I would really hope for 5. If we could draw Newcastle and Inter and beat Chelsea, because Lord knows how tribalistic football Twitter gets when Arsenal and Chelsea play. I really hope that we pick up the 3 points, even if for all the wrong reasons. If we could get a draw to Newcastle and a draw to Inter, I'd be very, very happy with our 2 rough patches to start the season.
I personally do not want to draw at Newcastle because I have this crazy gut feeling that if we draw, it's going to come back to bite us later in the season, and it's going to be that like one game I remember throughout the whole season where like, if we just won this fucking game and got 2 points, we would have finished.
Yeah, that's how I was with Fulham and West Ham last year. So we tried to cut those out.
Yeah, it sucks when you can take a draw, but you also don't want to take a draw. I hate those types of situations, I guess, but
I agree.
That's the modern football schedule when you have so many games.
No, I agree. It's like it was something I was saying in the last podcast where it's not about picking up the points that against the biggest. It's not now just about picking up the points against the biggest teams in the biggest matches. It's also about ensuring you get all 3 points against the smaller teams. And while that's more pertinent to Southampton, Bournemouth, etc., it does. You also somewhat get that feeling considering Newcastle isn't quite a Big Six club and St. James is such a difficult club to go to, you still want to pick up the 3 points. You know what I'm sort of saying by
Yeah, I know
by that
exactly what you mean.
extension? So yeah, those. I mean, that's a brief look forward. We've talked about some selection with the fullbacks. There are a couple more points here on our selection, sort of before we start to think about wrapping up. Marino has picked up some minutes for Spain after being injured. Martinelli may be out, but I haven't seen anything too negative there. And Odegaard's injury has been extended until December. So while we've talked about fullback selection and talked about general hopes. Yep.
I don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure that's a false claim.
I've fallen victim to one of the in the knows that isn't actually an in the know.
Team news and ticks in the know.
Yep, that's what I'm referring to.
I'm pretty sure it's been disproven.
That's crazy work. So does that mean that Odegaard's return date is still somewhere in November?
Mostly it's still somewhere in November, yeah.
Regardless, I still think that rules him out for every match that we've just touched on. The point still stands. With Odegaard out, Marino now getting up to match fitness, Martinelli, I may just even brush over that. I haven't seen anything negative beyond that he was being checked. Probably also like Saka's, where he may be a question for Bournemouth, but totally fine beyond that. I really want to talk about what the selection is. We know what our back four will be for most games, like we just talked about. And we know that we'll probably go with Martinelli, Saka, Havertz. Does that make our midfield selection pretty obvious in the Rice, Partey, Marino trio? Or do we think it'll be more like our 4-4-2? Do we think Trossard will still continue to pick up the minutes and have Rice and Partey, or Rice, Marino?
I think Trossard, Rice, Marino.
I agree with Arda. I think that
Me too.
I feel like Arteta is sort of like a pragmatist, and I feel like those three in midfield, there's way too many overlapping sort of profile characteristics. I think that I don't care who it is between Rice, Partey, and Marino. I think they all have a lot to offer in different game states. I think Trossard is a unicorn in a lot of senses of what he offers with sort of final balls that you can argue Havertz, as good as he is and as good as he's been. There's a part of Trossard's game, finishing-wise, and sort of getting that last ball that I feel like Havertz doesn't always have. So I agree with Arda. I do think that Trossard would get the nod before we see that midfield three. And then if something doesn't work, then I could see something changing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that we've seen a lot of good things from Trossard, even beyond his goals that he's gotten this year from Aston Villa, Leicester, if you count that winner as his goal instead of the own goal. We also saw a lot of other very interesting things, and we've seen this season as we've switched more to the 4-4-2 as our primary sort of formation. You see a lot of duos out there. Calafiore, I suppose it's more of a Calafiore, Marino, Rice, that's a trio, but you really see a duo of Timber and Saka. You really see a duo of Trossard and Havertz, and that Trossard-Havertz duo has probably been our best since the start of the season. We saw it against PSG. Trossard was the one who delivered the ball to Havertz. But beyond that as well, you see Trossard. I saw him against Leicester dropping into the spaces that Odegaard used to facilitate build-up play. And I do see in the chat, yes, I do agree that Havertz, Saka, the duos that I'm mentioning aren't super set in stone. I'm thinking primarily because I wanted to talk about Havertz, Trossard. I did also want to bring up Timber and Saka, but what I was saying on Trossard was that not only is he doing the things that he needs to in getting amongst the goals and facilitating creation, he's also dropping super deep to facilitate build-up as well. And so again, we called him a unicorn. I really do think he is. He has that sort of cult hero type status. That's really, I feel like we're going to look back in 5-10 years about what he did at the club and think we got this guy in a winter market for about 20-something million, and he scored key goals in clutch moments and really never put a foot wrong. So I agree. I think that considering how well we've been playing, considering how robust our 4-4-2 has been, particularly in our pressing shape, I do think that Trossard to start this run will be our starter. Does that mean that our midfield two then is Rice and Partey?
Man, if Trossard is on the pitch, Artie, you can go ahead if you want.
I mean, it's very basic, but I just think Arteta has a vision with Marino, So I think he's gonna try to force him in there, not force, but like implement him in there whenever possible. And Partey's gonna be there as like a backup if things go wrong, or if like he needs to adjust for a specific team or play style. But I think Marino Rice is the main vision in the midfield.
Yeah, the one thing that makes me nervous is Trossard would obviously sort of be in that like left advanced space, which I don't even know how to kind of put into words, but you guys can imagine like just the area generally speaking that Trossard likes to find himself. Rice likes to move over to the touchline on the left. Marino, being a lefty, naturally plays over in those spaces. So like I think the original vision, barring an Odegaard injury, would be Rice probably like more at the 8 where he kind of drifts right in front of the defense or drops between the two center backs. Marino advanced and sort of box crashing with Odegaard kind of navigating the entire sort of right side channel. With Odegaard out, Trossard being the one that comes in, I worry about what sort of control we have on that right-hand pod when Odegaard is out. And I do think that regarding like natural tendencies, I think that Partey is one of the only players that we actually have fit right now to go and comfortably play that role. So I do wonder, while we get Marino up to speed and while we wait for Odegaard to come back, if we're just going to go with what naturally comes best to this 11, which is, in my opinion, maybe Partey and Rice with Trossard kind of roaming in front of them.
I think I agree there. Yeah.
And Partey kind of because obviously Rice loves the left, keeping Partey on the right and just trying to keep things as balanced and I guess like I don't know if normal is the right word, but just like as comfortable as possible until we can get Odegaard back and then try sort of experimenting with what Marino might be best at, as opposed to just throwing him in the deep end.
Yeah, I think I agree with like that deep end sort of statement. Art, I agree with your statement that Arteta has very clear ideas for the players, every player that he brings in. He has a very exact and precise sort of script that he wants them and the team that they come into to follow. And I do think that with right now, with sort of a settled team, I think that the idea that he had for Marino was for him to be in a midfield 3 where Odegaard was also there. Again, for him to occupy sort of more advanced positions on the pitch, maybe have Rice for coverage while having Odegaard do a lot of the facilitation of build-up. Right now, with Odegaard out, I do think that without Partey, we may run into a build-up issue. I know I brought it up, I believe, briefly earlier about how we build up differently against different sort of teams that we come up against. In the lower pressing teams, like against Southampton, we saw David Raya coming up between the center backs to create that initial overload to help us build up. But then against teams that mid-block us or press us higher, we see Partey actually dropping back to facilitate that build-up. So there are a few different ways that we tweak our build-up, but again, Partey against some of the teams that we'll be coming up against, I think is more consistent with what we've seen in the past against these top quality teams. And while I do agree that Marino at some point will implement himself into the starting 11, I think for now, what we've seen is a player who may be a little bit more utility until we get our collective team together off of injury, including Odegaard, including more minutes for Marino, to implement that sort of ideology that Arteta have, which, to be honest, is something that I don't even know if we know yet because it's been so disjointed with who's been available this season that we haven't been able to see much.
So what about those games where Partey plays right back, though?
So I do think that the Partey right back situation was less about midfield availability and more about fullback availability.
Right. So what if you need availability in both sections? Is what I'm saying.
Right.
Which
I guess that my
looking like it might be the case.
Yeah. My asterisk here is absolutely the fact that I'm assuming that our right backs are fit. May not be the case. If that's not the case, Partey fullback could definitely be an option. I think that is the option. Then Marino certainly comes in. There's a scenario where both start. So that could happen. I'm still going to say let's assume and let's hope, let's keep our fingers crossed that Timber and White are fit and ready, because you always want your quality players out there. And if they are, I think I would lean towards a Partey start. But I guess that goes back again. This goes back to the sort of theme. We are a team that is ready to rotate as needed. Does anyone have an issue with Marino coming into the side? Because I certainly don't. I don't think any Arsenal fan does. And I don't think that, given the last performance and given his general performances this season, I don't think anyone has an issue with Partey going to right back. So if everyone's fit,
scared me at first.
No, right.
I just want to keep it real. But
assuming Odegaard is our only absence, except for Tommy and Tierney, who have been on the outskirts, I think, Jack, I would agree with you. I would go with Rice and Partey. Because, again, we would see a lot of the same combination type plays. We would see Partey in build-up. We would see Calafiori bombing forward with Rice as his coverage. And then Marino would come in as that utility player to hopefully win duels late. Or if we're chasing, be a aerial threat on our set pieces. Any other comments on team selection for this upcoming sort of mountainous endeavor that we're going to face?
No, we just don't know what we're going to see yet. I guess we will see when it happens.
Hope for the best. Hope for availability. If we have availability.
But I just hope our second lineup shows up for those mid-table games. That's really all.
Exactly.
I have enough trust in our first lineup against those big games, but it's those mid-table games that really worry me.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you become a Man City. You look back at their 20. Let's see, when do they have the likes of like Ferran Torres and like Eric Garcia and like their rotating players have to be ready for the matches against your West Hams and your Burnleys and whatnot back when they were playing. So we have to become that team as well. But with that said, we'll hope that our availability is there where it needs to be, and if it's there, we hope that the players who are selected certainly show up. But that's Southampton. That's also looking a little bit ahead. Looking at the form of Jesus, Sterling, Saka, Havertz as well. Haven't even touched on the ever great Gabriel Saliba. Really didn't talk much about Rice. Only briefly talked about Calafiori and David Raya. But again, those are players who have gone under the radar with, again, just another 8 out of 10 performance that we need from them. So we'll hope that continues too. So with that in mind, all right, so again, we are the TnT Footy Podcast. I am your host. Thank you for listening. You can find me on Twitter at AFC_1811. With me is Jack. Thank you again for your opinions tonight. You can find him on Twitter at GattickAFC. And also with us is Arda. Thank you in advance for all of the editing and all of the work that you're about to slave away on the next few days getting this video out. You can find him on Twitter at AKSparks. Thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you next week. Hopefully after another Arsenal win. We'll catch you.
Come on, you Gunners.